What's going on, everybody? You know, each week when I'm kind of thinking up a question, I always struggle to go, well, what would everybody else be interested in? But it seemed like this particular week, there was a lot of interest. So that means I think I did a good job. I came up with a question that had a lot more responses than normal. So that was fantastic. And it's definitely a topic that I think that we all have opinions on, which is the Hall of Fame. Who should be in the Hall of Fame? Who is not currently in the Hall of Fame? Now, there is the traditional ballot, as we all know, and then after, not receiving enough votes or a certain amount of time lapses, then what ends up happening is you fall off the ballot. But you can still get into the Hall of Fame through the Veterans Committees. Now, they've changed this multiple times over the years, but as things stand right now, they have 3 different Veteran Committee options that kind of rotate. And they're as follows. 1, there is a year where they vote on coaches and contributors to the Hall of Fame. People that were managers, people that were umpires or executives that they feel belongs in the Hall of Fame. And what happens the next year, which is this year, is it's players who did the majority of their contributions before 1980 that are not in the Hall of Fame. So these would be guys who, probably their rookie season was early 70s or mid to late 60s and before. The people who had the majority, so like an Ozzie Smith started his career before 1980, but his biggest impact was after 1980. So obviously he's in, but if he wasn't in, he would be a person that would be after 1980 because that's when most of his contributions took place. And then there's so there's the before 1980, there's the after 1980, and then there's contributors. And we're in a year this year where they're going to be deciding pretty darn soon who's going to be on that ballot and who gets in. And so I thought it would be interesting, since this is a topic we're about to hear how it turns out, if anybody is added. It is, who do you all think should be in that isn't in? And then anybody who got more than one mention, I included for you all here today. And we'll look at A, we'll look at their career. B, we'll look at their rookie card and card prices. And then we'll look at some of your statements in support of those people and why. And I had a really good time doing this. And again, it's like, well, why are we talking about this, Greg? How does this matter? Well, a lot of people have moved away from set collecting. Set collecting is not dead, but set collecting isn't as popular as it once was. What a lot of people are doing instead is they're doing like Hall of Famer runs or player runs or team set runs. And so a lot of people like to collect Hall of Fame rookie cards. Well, if a guy is not in the Hall of Fame right now and then gets into the Hall of Fame, obviously their demand would go way up, because all of the people who collect Hall of Fame rookie cards would say, oh, I don't have that player. I need to go out and now get his rookie card. And so it would definitely affect their prices. And it's not just rookie cards. It could be all of their cards would have an increase in demand because there's a lot of Hall of Fame player collectors. So it's something to be on the lookout for, because there will probably be a spike. When you have a veteran player, it's not like there's suddenly going to be something that's going to make their demand go through the roof, except for something like now being in the Hall of Fame. So it would certainly affect prices for pretty much any of these players. But before I get to the list that you all submitted, I wanted to share a couple of gifts that I got. My friend Dean, this was really, really sweet. He heard me on Dr. Beckett's podcast, and I was mentioning how, the story about my dad finding one of his original baseball cards from his own collection. Long story. I'll put a link to that video because I ended up doing a whole video on it about a year and a half ago, and I mentioned it in that conversation with Dr. Beckett. And Dean heard it, and then I ended up forwarding him the video that I did on that whole story. And so Dean sent me this. This is the card. And my dad wrote Mike M there on the bottom. Now, he didn't write it on the card, he wrote it on the sleeve. But he bought me the card, the same card that my dad had found of his own in his collection, which he now has. The other thing he sent me, he's a huge Rickey Henderson fan. And Dean actually just started a channel. I've watched a few of his episodes, and they're really good. So I'm going to put a link to his channel down in the description below too. I really enjoy and respect the way he collects, and he's got some really cool stuff. But as a big Rickey Henderson fan, he sent me this misprint Rickey Henderson card, which is super cool because it makes it extra special that it's from him, being this massive Rickey Henderson collector. And then my friend Winston, he sent me this game-used Clemens on the Yankees relic. So that patch on there, that was super cool. Winston's been very generous to me. He sent me a few things, and that was awesome. And then my buddy Kryptonite, he said, I don't know, you might not have this Clemens card. And I don't think I do. On the back of it is Doug Drabek. Remember Doug Drabek? And I don't think I have this card. There aren't many Clemens cards where he's in a Red Sox uniform that I don't already have, but I think that's one of them. And then he also sent me, I love the 52 Wheaties, the hand-cut 52 Wheaties cards. I think they're awesome. I know my buddy Chris from Missouri really likes them as well. And he sent me this Sam Snead, and as a golf card collector, that is awesome. I'm super excited for this. Like, I've multiple times almost bought this card. I don't have it. Super excited to get that from my buddy Kryptonite. And then my friend Carl, all the way from Australia, he's been very, very kind to me, very generous to me. We've corresponded multiple times. He sent me some cricket cards. He sent me a cricket album a while back, which I showed. And I loved it. I don't know a lot about cricket, but I love the passion for cricket. And I love any kind of cards. And so there's this set here that are called the Stamina Trousers set, as you can see on the back. And there are 11 cards in the set, and he sent me the whole set. And they're beautiful cards. Look at how awesome these cards are. It's a set of 11. Man, and they're in really good condition. I absolutely love these. So he sent me the whole set, and they're just gorgeous cards. And the fact that he's from Australia and a cricket card collector makes it super special. So very excited for those. Thank you so much to everybody who sent me something. That was super, super kind, super generous. Let's take a look at the person who you all mentioned the most from last week that isn't in the Hall of Fame, that you think should be in the Hall of Fame, who is potentially an option for the Veterans Committee this year. Let's take a look. Now, this very first person got by far the most votes. Probably 6 or 7 people mentioned this name with their explanations as to why he was deserving or is deserving. A 7-time All-Star, 3 times won the Gold Glove Award at his position. Also was an AL MVP and an AL Rookie of the Year. Now, that may have given it away. 2 times won a World Series, has a career batting average of .292, and had a career WAR of 45.6. which probably would have been higher, or certainly would have been higher, had his career not been cut short. So who is it? Well, none other than Thurman Munson. Now, Thurman Munson's rookie card in an SGC 7 recently sold for $169.47, but probably his more popular card is his 71 Topps. Munson's one of these guys where I think that his contributions to the team go far beyond what stats can show. And the fact that he wasn't able to finish his career because of his untimely death makes it where his resume isn't complete, which makes it even more of a tragedy that he's not in the Hall of Fame. Now, I find it really interesting that he got probably double the votes of the second highest vote getter. But, I mean, I get it. I think that he's deserving as well, especially when you consider defense. This comment says, Thurman Munson should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think a catcher is just one of those positions where it's been difficult historically for catchers to make the Hall of Fame. And when Ted Simmons or Joe Mauer, who is the most recent at the position to be elected to the Hall of Fame, led to some discussion online about the Hall of Fame being watered down. Mauer was a great player who sadly had some serious injuries which caused him to switch to first base. To me, Munson was a top 3 or top 5 catcher for a decade, and one of the biggest reasons they won 2 World Series, and he was clutch. The Yankees captain for a reason. Buster Posey will likely make the Baseball Hall of Fame when he's eligible along with Yadier Molina. And in my opinion, Munson statistically is comparable to those guys. In the question, was more than one deserving? Well, Curt Flood would receive further consideration. Today's players owe a lot to him for being a pioneer and trailblazer. Basically sacrificed the last few years of his career too. Tommy John would be a fine choice too. I see him as the Fred McGriff of pitchers. When it comes to the history of baseball, it's difficult to tell the story of the game without these players being mentioned. Good question. Now, you know I like the choice. He's a Yankee captain, but the Thurman Munson choice is just a fantastic one. And there were so many people that mentioned him. There were like 6 people that wrote a full comment about him, and then a few others that mentioned him in their comment. And, you know, I think the case was just made for the most part. You know, so why isn't he in? I mean, when a guy retires at a young age, he just decides, I don't want to play anymore. And that's what cuts their career short. That's kind of one thing. But when a guy passes away unexpectedly in the middle of August, in the middle of the season, passes away, and then doesn't get to finish his career, and then his stats aren't Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, first of all, I think they are Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, the guy was like the heart and soul of a pretty important franchise, at least in my household. And, you know, he won an MVP. And if you look at the 4 or 5 years before he passed away, the guy was averaging like nearly 100 RBIs. He was hitting right around 100 or over, right around 300 or just over 300 every year. I mean, the guy was still playing at a very, very high level. And then he dies in a plane crash. And no, his numbers aren't quite good enough. And the thing about some players, especially catchers, is their stats. You can't compare their stats to the stats of a first baseman or a center fielder. Their importance is so different. You can't put their importance on a stat sheet. And as was mentioned there's a couple of other pretty, good catchers who, he's right there with, and they're in. So how's he not in? I think it's a great choice. I totally agree. Hopefully this year's the year, but we'll see. The person with the second most votes from all of you was a pitcher. 288 career wins, a 3.34 career ERA, 2,245 career strikeouts, a 4-time All-Star, 3 times had 20-plus wins in a season, 2 times was a Cy Young runner-up, and he had a career WAR of 61.6, which is pretty darn high. When you look at those career wins and you look at that career WAR, it does seem hard to believe that he's not already in the Hall of Fame. So who is this player? Well, it is none other than Tommy John. Tommy John, a longtime pitcher, obviously did more than just his stat lines show. He also risked his career and ended up changing the career of many future players. You can see his rookie card here from the 1964 Topps is $32.64 in a recent sale in an SGC 6. That is criminally underpriced, if you ask me. The thing about Tommy John, well, I'll get to it in a minute, but it is interesting that he has a big contribution to the game and was a really good player in the game. And that might be part of the issue, is that he made contributions on and off the field. So, one of the comments said, "Great video as always. My answer for this week's question, and without even hesitating, the first name that came to my mind was Tommy John. Besides his 288 wins, an ERA of 3.34, and a career WAR of 61.6, the guy underwent a risky surgery in September of 1974 to repair his troubled arm. Obviously, we all know that now as Tommy John surgery. The guy has a surgery named after him. Here he is, a young pitcher undergoing a surgery no one really knew about, risking his career for unknown long-term results. His contribution to the game, along with his already spectacular career stats, should enshrine him in the Hall of Fame. I hope this counts as a pre-1980 because he did pitch another 7 or 8 years post-1980. So I think this might be the perfect example of his votes getting split. Should he get in as a player? It's really close. He's got 288 wins. If he had 300, he would be in, right? So he has 288 wins. He has a really good ERA. He has well over 2,000 strikeouts. 2-time Cy Young runner-up. So as just his stat line, and you go, well, he wasn't really great. Well, he's runner-ups to Cy Young twice. So he had a couple of pretty darn good, great seasons. But it's sort of like the Fred McGriff or the Harold Baines effect of being good for a long time. But he also had he had several 20-game win seasons. But that's as a player. And then I think he could get voted in as a contributor. Now, because there's a separate category for contributor, I think it's possible that maybe the reason he's not getting in is because some of the player voters are saying, well, he should go in as a contributor and not as a player. And I think some of the contributor people are saying he shouldn't go in as a contributor, he should go in as a player. And that might be kind of splitting his vote. It's like, to me, he should be really, really close for 2 different reasons. If he got voted in as a contributor for, the risk he took on his career and how it changed the career of so many others, I think that's a valid argument. And if you say the guy had 288 wins, the guy pitched really, really well for a really, really long time, I think that he's got a pretty good argument as a player. But I don't think that they include the other things. Since there's a whole category for contributor and a whole category for player, I don't know if the player voters consider his contributions off the field. And that might be the part that's preventing it. But we'll see here pretty soon. But his rookie card price, that's insane. That's insane that his rookie card is that cheap. If he makes the Hall of Fame, it won't be that cheap. Let's take a look at the next one.
Now, I think some of the upcoming ones will be a little bit more difficult, but all were mentioned 2 or 3 times. This first player, 7-time Gold Glove Award winner, 3-time All-Star, 2 times World Series champion, a career batting average of .293, 7 times batted over 300, 8 times had seasons with 160 or more hits, and has a career WAR of 35.9. Now, this particular player, like Tommy John, had some contributions off the field as well as on the field, which, again, might be kind of splitting his votes. Is he deserving as a player? Maybe. Probably. Is he deserving as a contributor? Probably. But I think that the fact that they aren't considered together might be the thing that's keeping him out from being inducted. So who is it? Who is this player? Well, none other than Curt Flood. His 1958 Topps rookie card in an SGC 5 recently sold for $46.01. It's a beautiful card, and the copy there on the screen is a beautiful copy. $46, huh? Well, one of the comments in support of Curt Flood says, my pick would be Curt Flood. His exploits on the field were cut short. He was already on the path for the Hall, but he decided that it was much more important to do the right thing in an era of great discrimination. His efforts in court would lead to ball players today receiving crazy amounts of money. Thanks for the topic and look forward to see what others think. Greg from Ohio.
I think Curt Flood is very, very similar to the Tommy John thing. I think the contributor veterans group could vote him in for his contributions to free agency, for his contributions to player pay, and what he did to change the game for future generations. And I think that the player voters could make the argument that he was good enough as a player. Now, if you combine the two, it's a no-brainer. But it doesn't seem like, since there are 2 separate categories, that you combine the two. But why wouldn't you be able to? That's the only thing I can think on Tommy John and Curt Flood is that they can't consider these other things because they're looking at them as a player. And then for the contributors, they can't consider them as a player. They're just looking at them as a contributor. But it sure seems like they should be able to be combined, because if you can combine them as a player and their contributions to the game, it certainly seems like they're both kind of no-brainers. I don't really get it, and I researched the heck out of the Hall of Fame and how these veteran groups vote and how they get nominated, and it's all really vague. It's very vague, and it doesn't get into specifics, and I think they kind of want it vague, maybe, so that it's harder to say that a voter got it wrong. I don't know, but it's really interesting to me that these 2 guys aren't in when you consider them as a player and their contributions.
Another player who received multiple votes had 2,757 career hits, and that might be a giveaway for some of us. a 4-time All-Star, won a Gold Glove award, 2-time league leader in hits, and 4 times had 200 hits or more in a season. His career WAR was 47.3. So clearly this guy could hit, and he obviously wasn't bad in the field as well. And so some of you are saying, who might this one be? Now, it's a little bit more difficult than some of the names we've seen so far, I think. But a lot of you, when you saw the hit total, quickly were able to get this one. It's none other than Vada Pinson. And the price on his rookie card seems crazy. In an SGC 5, his 58 Topps rookie card recently sold for $26. Now, this was at auction, so it doesn't mean they always sell that low, but it was in middle of August that it sold for $26. And again, as I've mentioned a few times, the grading fees at SGC are $15. And this is the rookie card of a guy who had over 2,700 hits and was a really, really good player. So, very interesting that he's not currently in the Hall. One of the comments in support of him says, "It still shocks me every time I see Vada Pinson's statistics, knowing he didn't make the Hall. 2,750 plus hits with a 55 B WAR. Come on, if he plays another year and a half, he's a no-brainer in the 3,000 hit club. He led the NL in hits twice and has the highest number of hits of any classic era player not in the Hall of Fame, other than Rose, but that's a separate issue. Great defender and base runner as well."
So one of the things I think by human nature that a lot of us do is we say, well, if that guy's in, then that guy should be in. And I think Vada Pinson is a perfect example of that. A very, very good hitter for a long time. And you say, well, if Harold Baines is in, I'm sorry, I don't hate Harold Baines, by the way. I just think if Harold Baines is worthy of the Hall of Fame, which apparently he is according to the people who vote, then that means there are other people who should also be worthy because I think they were better than him. Harold Baines played for a really long time, like over 20 seasons, like 21, 22 years, something like that, and was able to DH for a lot of that, which some of these other guys weren't able to do. How much more stats could they have raked in if they were able to DH or played in a league that had DH? And I just think that, a guy like a Vada Pinson, I think the argument would have been tougher 10 years ago. I think there's still a good argument. But when some of the guys that have gotten in are in, I think it's really hard to say he doesn't also belong. So I do think that he's an example of, well, if you let him in, you got to let this guy in. And then some people say, well, that waters it down. I'm not worried about things being watered down as I am things being fair. There shouldn't be people in the Hall of Fame who aren't as good as other people who are in the Hall of Fame. To me, as soon as you changed the thermostat, as soon as you said 77 degrees in the house is too warm, so we're going to lower it to 75, then everything at that amount and above deserves in. And I think that maybe the thermostat was reset a few years ago. And I think that suddenly means some of these other guys deserve to be in. Because you can't just say, well, that one was a mistake. Well, it wasn't a mistake. He's in. You can't undo it. So if he's in, some other people deserve to be in, including this next guy.
All right, so the next one, 11-time All-Star and had 5 gold gloves. That's a lot of All-Stars and a lot of gold gloves. Also was a National League MVP and had a career WAR of 62.8, which is really, really high for someone not in the Hall of Fame. And by the way, he was on a World Series championship team. How about Ken Boyer? Again, a really good defensive player and a really good hitter. And if you look here, his rookie card from the 55 top set. And again, this is a beautiful copy. This one's in an SGC 5. Sold for $65 at a buy it now at the very end of July. It's so interesting to me that a player that good with a card that's that nice looking can sell for that little. But that's part of what happens, I guess, when these really, really good players aren't Hall of Famers. And I think that card would be significantly more expensive, obviously, if he did eventually make the Hall of Fame. And one of the messages in support of him is my buddy Billy Ballgame, who says, "Hey Greg, another awesome conversation, my friend. I answered this week's question with, there are a lot of players deserving of Hall of Fame induction. Vada, Pinson, and Tommy John immediately jump out to me. But since you wanted us to pick one player, I'll go with the Cardinals' homer pick of Ken Boyer. He has a baseball reference WAR of 62.8, 2,143 career hits, 282 career home runs, 1,141 career RBI, and he also won 5 Gold Gloves. Was an 11-time All-Star. Oh, and by the way, he won an MVP. He had a 14-year career, but due to a back injury, most of his production came over the first 10 years. He hit over 305 times and hit 20 or more home runs 8 times. His NL MVP came in 1964, and the next season his back issues began, which affected him for the rest of his career. From then forward, his career best in home runs was 14, and RBI was 75. Clearly a shell of his former self."
I think my buddy Billy Ballgame kind of just summarized anything I could say. The only thing I would really add to this one is the game of baseball is not just about hitting. The game requires pitching, hitting, base running, defense. And for whatever reason, it's not like sexy to say this guy's a good defender, so he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And I don't really get that, because a really good defensive player, I mean, there's some really good defensive player. Omar Vizquel, really good defensive player. But he doesn't belong in because he didn't quite have enough hits. He was just a little short of the hit total he needed. I don't really get that. Like, defense is important. If there's a player who's a good hitter, but an awful defender, that affects his value. How come a really good defender? Now, I can hear people screaming all the way from New Jersey. They're screaming, Keith Hernandez, Keith Hernandez. Mookie, I know, I hear you. But his contributions were predominantly after 1980. We're talking about the guys before 1980 right now. So just calm down for a minute, Mook. We'll get to Keith Hernandez next year when we do the post-1980 players. But yeah, he's a great example as well. Absolutely. Being a really good defender is really, really valuable, which is part of the reason that a guy like a Thurman Munson deserves to be in. Not all of the stats tell the story of the importance of a player to a team and to a game. And that, I think, is part of the story with Ken Boyer. And the injury costing him years, you know, that'll be part of the argument people will make next year about Mattingly. Same thing. Now, an injury is a little bit different than a death, like Thurman Munson had, to me. but it still at least should go into the think tank as you're cranking the think tank to try to decide who deserves to be in or not. I kind of think he probably deserves to be in, but he's not. Will he get in this year? We'll find out soon.
Another name that came up many, many times is a controversial one, and one that none of us will all agree on. But a 17-time All-Star, a 3-time NL batting champion, a 3-time World Series champion, 2-time Gold Glove Award winner, had 4,256 career hits and a career WAR of 79.5, and certainly a whole lot of controversy to go with that stat line. Now, I think that you all probably know who this one is without much difficulty, but I do think that it's worthy of mentioning since so many of you mentioned him on the list with reasons as to why. And I think that they're really good, valid arguments. So why not continue the discussion, debate, conversation here? And as we all know, one of the most iconic baseball cards in the history of baseball cards is the 1963 Topps Pete Rose rookie card. This SGC6 sold, a week or so ago for $1,676, and it is a gorgeous example of this very, very famous and very, very difficult card. A difficult one to find well-centered, a difficult one to find with good edges, and that one checks pretty much all of those boxes. One of the comments in support of Pete Rose says, Pete Rose, MLB has banned him for 38 years now. Betting now is widely accepted. That is why major sports have moved into Vegas. How long can you punish the guy for the wrong he did? Let's go. The hit king to the hall.
Oh man, what can I say about Pete Rose that hasn't already been said? You know, to me, this is just Greg's opinion for whatever it's worth. You know, the guy has more hits than anybody who's ever played. The guy played really, really hard. The guy was really, really good. The guy was an integral part of a team that won multiple championships. And the guy has some demons that got the best of him at times. Now, I understand the argument. There are signs posted in the clubhouses that say betting on baseball will result in you being banned. I get that. Even though that was posted, he went ahead anyway and made some bad decisions. And he has 100%, in my opinion, been punished. But at what point does it become cruel and unusual punishment? The punishment has to fit the crime. And to me, him still not being in the Hall of Fame after all these years, it's gotten to the point where for me, it's a little excessive at this point. I am going to also throw out there, you know, it's similar to some of the steroid guys. Oh boy, here he goes. But if Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, who oversaw the steroid era, but as soon as Bud Selig got in the Hall of Fame, when everybody knew what was happening in the clubhouses, but profits were soaring, attendance was going up, ratings was going up, and he just kind of looked the other way until he couldn't anymore, and then he gets in the Hall of Fame. How does the guy who basically allowed steroids to continue get in the Hall of Fame, but the guys who are accused, not even the ones that are proven, not even the ones who tested positive, although there is one who tested positive who's in the Hall of Fame. I don't really get it. And it's just not just about Clemens, even though I know you guys think that it is. But there are so many betting websites, sports betting, baseball betting websites that even advertise within the major league ballparks because it helps ratings, because it helps profits. But Pete Rose doesn't get in. I don't get it. That's all I'll say. Tell me how I'm wrong down below. But also down below, tell me what you think about this week's question. Many vintage cards from the 1950s and 60s certainly seem to have dropped in price over the last couple of years. Are you buying, selling, or holding as a result of this current dip? Now, I understand. We're in the same hobby. You're saying, well, Greg, I'm buying cards. I understand we're all going to be buying some cards because we want to participate in the hobby, and it's a hobby of accumulation, right? That's what the hobby is. It's accumulating things. But this dip in particular, does it affect your behavior? Does a drop in prices have you say, I think prices are cheap, so I'm going to increase my buying right now? Or do you think this dip is just getting started and is going to continue to dip? So you're holding off. You're buying little stuff. You're maybe trading. You may be selling some stuff, but you're holding off from making the big purchases because you think there's still a lot of downside to go in this dip? Or are you just kind of in a wait and see? Again, I know that you're all probably buying some stuff, but how is this dip over the last 2 years affecting your decision making right now? Is it affecting your decision making or is it not? Because things have gone down, and they haven't just gone down because of COVID. They've gone down in some cases to pre-COVID numbers. Tell me how your behavior has changed as far as your collecting, your buying, your selling, your accumulating because of the drop in the market. I look forward to hearing what you all think.